Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another Workbench Wednesday. Give people a few minutes here to log in. If you can hear me, please give me a thumbs up or let me know in the chat. Thank you very much. Uh, Welcome back to Workbench Wednesday. This has been a fun weekly, a bi-weekly series that we've been doing for quite a few months now. And as summer's getting near, what we're going to do tonight is actually going to be our season one finale. And we're going to wrap things up tonight, do a few little simple details, finish off some extra details on the house that we've been working on actually the last couple of sessions. And chat a little bit, and then we're going to take a break from this series over the summer months because I suspect many of you will want to make up for a lost summer last year and get out and start enjoying the weather and newfound freedoms and enjoy summer for all it has to offer. So we're heading into what's traditionally sort of the slow season for model railroading, and even though I'm sure I'll still be at the workbench quite a few times, and we may jump in from time to time with a special if something really cool pops up. But we'll be putting the show on hiatus until September, and after Labor Day we'll come back and resume and do these again. Brian is asking how about an upcoming catalog teaser to go with the finale. We'll see. Maybe if you twist my arm enough, we'll release a catalog hint or two, and I won't be around in September to come back. But definitely we will be doing catalog shows over the summer. For sure, those will be released. We're about 6 weeks out, 6 or 7 weeks out here now from the next C2 catalog release. We're actually reviewing drafts of that now, getting things ready to go to the printer, getting final edits done. So the catalog is coming together really nicely. So hello to John and Gus and Rick and Chuck. Good to have you all here. I see we've got the LCCA on board also, twisting my arm for a catalog preview. You guys will definitely be the first to see it at the virtual convention this year. So we're looking forward to that in a few more weeks as well. So definitely looking forward to summer and looking forward maybe to a more normal summer than we had last year. So maybe a few less kits get built this year, but I think it'll be worth it, and we'll definitely get back into it. On the other hand, hopefully, maybe many of you found this hobby over the last couple of months and are enjoying it. And those hot days, especially down here in North Carolina, it can be just as much fun to be inside in the air conditioning working on a model as it can be outside doing yard work. So the trains don't have to go away just because the days get longer, but we will be putting just this program on a regular pause until we come back in September. So with that all being said, let's move into doing some actual modeling tonight instead of just sitting here listening to me talk to you and babble on. I thought we'd do tonight to wrap things up because we've been doing this a little bit all year long. We've been talking about some basic tips and techniques of how you can build and improve on your modeling. And tonight we're going to truly focus on the little details. Because what we want to do with all of our models, whether we talk about our model train platform in general or each individual little specific piece that we do, we're trying to tell a story. And the details really can help make a difference in that. So there's a lot of attention that gets placed on these little tiny details. And this is true whether you're talking about a steam locomotive or a freight car or a structure or the way you lay out your town and your scenery. From start to finish, those details really make a difference in how you tell the story that you want to tell. And small little details and little vignettes on your layout can make even a very small layout seem bigger, because as your eye is drawn into little areas and from area to area, you get really sucked into that little world. And what mainly be a few square inches of space can give you something to study for quite a few minutes, and then you sort of move on to the next spot. And even a small, modest train platform, if it's well detailed, can occupy someone's visual and interest for a long time as you run trains. So tonight we're going to do a few added details onto the house kit that we had been working on over the past couple of weeks. And I'm going to bring up the workbench cam here, and so you have an overhead view. This is the house kit that we had been working on. All right, as I get myself oriented. So this may look familiar to many of you. We spent a few weeks working on this. This was a kit bash from some of our Lionel HO model kits. We took it from a 2-story building down to a Cape Cod style. We modified the back porch, changed a lot of things around, painted, detailed, and everything, of course. Added some details to it already, but the area we're going to focus on tonight is actually this big, nice empty space here inside the garage. And for this one, I have a little special treat planned for my buddy Dave. We're going to do this in honor of our friend Dave, who does demos with Dave on Mondays. If you didn't catch him this past week, definitely jump onto the pages and look that one up. This past Monday, Dave went over our new VSR, our voice recording and streaming feature in our Lion Chief sets. So that's a really exciting one. You'll want to make sure you go back and catch that. But we're gonna detail the inside of this garage for Dave, and I think every layout needs an open garage or two with a nice garage band inside. So I thought tonight we would detail this one up and put a small version of Dave's all-time favorite band. It's called Tiger Army, and they're a little obscure, but Dave absolutely loves these guys. So if you're ever around Dave and you want to get started on a good long conversation, start talking about Tiger Army, and he will definitely thank you for that. So we're going to put a little Tiger Army inside of our garage here tonight, along with a few other details, because it's a garage after all, so you need some lockers and cabinets and tools and stuff laying around in there also. And that'll be our first project for the night, is doing some of these little details and painting that up. I did mount in here already a color changing LED. You can see we've got our regular stick-on light in the main house, and then over here in the garage, if I tip this right, hopefully you can see it, we've got a large LED here in the corner, and this actually is a color-changing LED, so that'll look like they've got some fun lighting effects going on there in the background. So all the house part is done. We're going to zoom in here on the details, and hopefully you'll be able to appreciate this. As we paint some of these small details, it's a lot like finishing a larger model. A lot of the steps are going to be very much the same, just doing it on a very small scale. And it's a multi-step process. And it's very tempting when you get into small details like this to just want to slap some paint on it and stick it in the building and be done. But the more time you spend here, the more benefit you'll have. We're going to start off with a couple of simple castings. Upside down and backwards here. The first one I'm doing here, and it's going to be hard to see much right now, it probably just looks like a little black speck on your screen. These are a little stack of crates. This is a white metal casting, like a pewter metal. You can get little castings like this in plastic, pewter, resin, wood. There's details aplenty, and the finishing steps are all pretty much the same. The first step is to prime them, and this has been given a quick coat of black primer. Done very simply with a rattle can of spray paint outside in good ventilation. And you just want to give the paints that we're going to apply something to adhere to. Now, the color of primer that you use is entirely up to you. A lot of people start with a neutral gray or a beige color if you want to do a lighter finish. I went with black on these because it's going to help with the recessed areas, so I don't have to go as heavy on the washes later on to bring out the darker spots. And it'll also darken the colors over top a little bit, and just give it some more, a little bit just darker tones. But you can start with any color primer that you like. It will impact the color you put over top, of course, but that's part of the fun. So I'm going to start with a base color, and I've done a few of these already because we'll be doing some multiple steps, but I do want to at least start on one so you get to see the whole process. And to start this off, because these are going to be wood crates, I'm going to use a light beige color. And instead of just slopping paint on here, what I'm going to do is essentially a dry brushing. A little bit of a heavy dry brush perhaps, but it's a dry brush. And a dry brush, you put a little bit of paint on the bristles of your brush. I like a stiff bristle brush, works best for this. And then we're going to get most of that paint off. Okay, as you can see there how now as I'm brushing on my palette, I don't get a lot of paint. And then we're going to take what's left on the brush and very gently up over the surface. Probably has to have a little more paint on there than I'd like, but it's okay for our first coat. So this is more of a heavy dry brushing, not quite a highlight dry brushing like we'll do later. So it's okay because we do want to get some base color on this. I'm using my handy third hand here, which is just a simple cork with some sticky tack on it, and that makes a great set of extra fingers for you to help hold little parts like this so they're not flopping around quite as much. As that wears down, get a little bit more on there. You can always start with a side that you don't expect to be shown first if you're just getting the practice on this or trying to judge your paint. And then you won't get things too sloppy right away. And this is just a light acrylic paint, so it's going to dry really, really fast and goes on. And since you're putting such a light layer of it on there, it really won't take long at all to dry. All right, but now, as you can see, if we zoom in here nice and close, we've got a little bit, we've got some color on here. And because I didn't put the paint on too thick, and hopefully this is showing up in camera, you can actually see the detail in this casting a lot better. Those dark areas from the primer show through, particularly in the cracks. We've hit the high spots and left the recessed areas in the shadows. So that's where that black starting primer helps out a lot. All right. We can continue to add layers of color to this and build it up bit by bit. Got another little small casting here I'm going to do quickly since I've got the paint out. So if we don't want all of our crates to be the same color, for example, we can simply get another color on our brush and repeat this process. This is going to seem very tedious, and if you're not into modeling and small work like this, I'm sure it could be, but it can also be kind of relaxing to just sit there and dab on some paint as you go. Just so we can have a little bit of a contrast here, I'm going to grab a slightly warmer color, and we'll brush it on one of these crates just to darken things a bit. Same process. I'm even going to wash out the brush, dipping a little in the paint. Pull this a little closer to me and down a little more. Hopefully I can zoom in for you. Again, show you here. I'm going to brush off the excess. We're going to focus just on this top crate this time. Hit all the different sides. Again, a stiff brush works a lot better for this. And actually, if you have some of the best dry brushing brushes are your old crusty brushes that you wouldn't use for much of anything else anymore because they're stiff and the bristles are a little harder, and they're just kind of sloppy, and you don't really quite care about them as much. Those are great brushes to hang on to for dry brushing and weathering powders as well sometimes. Do one more. As I said, this is sort of a heavier dry brush effect on these because I am trying to get a lot of color on it. The last step of doing these castings is also going to be dry brushing, but we're going to want to be very, very faint on those colors to truly just highlight the top details. Okay, so we've got some color there. Now I'm going to wash out the brush a little bit. All right. Donald says, great tip to share is these details like crates can be loads for our rolling stock, such as boxcars and gondolas as well. Absolutely. Although I'm going to be putting these in a building, you can use these things anywhere on your layout. And once you start finding these detail parts, it becomes a hobby in and of itself. Just gathering up details and building them and detailing and populating. This is why a model railroad is never finished. But an open door on a boxcar with some crates and things inside there, really eye-catching piece when the train goes by. Just draws you right in as you're watching things. All right. So as you can see here, I've got a few other castings that were done the other night, so that you didn't have to sit here and wait through this. And we've got some different highlights and colors on here. Here's a box of scrap wood. This will probably end up in our garage. And before you go to this next step, I do like to let the castings dry overnight, so that paint really sets. Because what I'm going to do next is put on a thin wash of ink and alcohol, and the alcohol will obviously dissolve some of those acrylic paints if it's not fully set. You can also give these a clear coat of a flat spray finish as well to help seal in that base coat, so you don't have that issue as much. Worried about that. But yeah, as you put a thin wash over it, it can dilute any of the other wet paints. So I'm going to use my Inkahol wash. You've probably seen this before if you've been on here. This is just a mixture of rubbing alcohol and a little bit of India ink, which you can pick up at any hardware store or art supply store, I should say. And the formula of the ratio of ink to alcohol is kind of up to you. A lot of modelers will have 2, maybe even 3 different washes, a really heavy dark wash and a lighter wash, depending on what they want. And there's really no single right or wrong answer. You put a little bit on there until it looks right to you. And the nice thing about these is if you start with a light wash, you can always put more on and build up a darker color. So it's very easy to build up the colors and get the consistency that you want. All right, so I'm going to try and hold this up and do this as close as I can for you in front of this so you can see it as best as possible. Put it on this thing, hopefully in frame. And I've got a little bit of Inkahol on my brush, and I'm just dabbing it on and allowing it to really flow into all of the recesses in the casting. So sort of like we started off with that black primer, so that these shadows would stay darker. We're now going to go back and repeat that process. And this is just going to tone everything down a little bit and bring out those details a little bit more. So we'll do that and let that dry. It will lighten a bit as it dries. Here's another shelf. This one's full of all sorts of little goodies. This is another white metal casting. I went in with a small detail brush and just painted some things here and there. You don't have to overdo it on here. A couple different colors, a few spots of color here and there is really all you need on these to bring it out and catch someone's eye. Now we're going to go in and put some of this wash, especially in the back of the shelves, to bring out the recess and the shadow a little bit, make that a little bit more impressive. Get our sides, bring out some of that wood grain. Get on the top. Even a relatively simple casting, like this cabinet, you can see how the wash tends to want to find those low areas on its own. So if you just put it on there and let it sit for a little bit, it'll dry and get you exactly what you want. This doesn't really take that long, especially if you're not narrating and talking through every step. You can blast through these washes very quickly. You got a little trash can here. This should really help the trash can bring out those corrugations. You can do this on painted figures and painted details, pre-colored things as well. A little bit of a wash is a great way. Here we have some figures. This will be one of our band players here. Still in frame? Yeah. We're going to do the same thing. Just put a little bit of wash on here. I'm not trying to dirty them up, but it'll be just enough to help bring out some of the details in the casting that get lost in a monotone heavy paint. Just dulls it down just a little bit. So this is a fast step that makes a big difference. Once the alcohol dries, if you're not 100% happy with it, it's not a big deal. You can always come back and give it another wash if it's not quite dark enough for you yet. And one more casting here. Get this little bit of wash. All right, and let's come back here to one of our first ones. Let's see if that's dried a little bit. Yes. So you can see now, hopefully, that this has gotten a little bit darker, and those details are popping a little bit more. But if you're not happy, not a problem at all. Just, again, put another wash or two over top of it. Okay, once that's dried completely, we're going to go back and do some more dry brushing. Now we want to add the highlights. So we've colored in the main body, then we've covered in the shadows, and now we're going to hit the highlights so you get depth in the casting. And this is a good tip whether you're doing a model detail casting like this, or if you're painting rocks or any type of scenery. A little bit of a highlight can really pull a lot of things together. Most people will use a light white color for this, but you can do this in any color that you want. Sometimes it's good to just pick a very much lighter shade of the common color of the casting. So since this is mostly a gray, instead of using, I could use white, but I think I'm going to use a very light gray on this to just hit those tips. I'm going to use the same brush I used earlier. See here, I just dip a little bit in the cap of the paint, and now I want to get as much of that paint off as possible. So you can see it looks like there's really almost nothing left on that brush. And now very carefully, I'm going to brush over the tops of the boards and the outside of this box. The first time you do it, you might not even see it, but that's okay. You can always go back and repeat this step as many times as necessary until you get the amount that you want. But it's so much easier to add a little bit more than to take a little bit off. And I think I'm pretty content with that. Might show up a little bit better here on a darker casting. Let's try our shelf here with all of the details on it. Brush this on and hit some of those highlights. I'm sure you can probably see it really nicely here on this red can at the top. So just a little bit of a touch like this on your details, and you can do this. It doesn't have to be a small detail part. We can do this to a regular model as well. I'm just going to pick up the actual house here and just lightly brush over the shutters, for example, here. Almost all this paint off. I'll just put a very light coat over that. And those details come out a little bit more. You can see it's just hitting the top of the shutter itself. It's not getting down into all the grooves. And it'll just help highlight those details just a little bit. And sometimes that's all you need. All right, before I move on to the next couple of steps here, let me stop and take a couple of questions and a couple of comments. Let's see here. We've got, can I power a Line Chief Plus or 2.0 engine with a Line Chief set power pack? Yes, you can. They will run off of DC, and you'll have no trouble with that. Now, the power supplies that come in our sets are designed for the amount of equipment that you're running in a set. So as you get larger and more equipment and accessories, and you start loading up your layout, you'll want to get a larger power supply so that you have more amperage. But they absolutely will run off of the same power supply, the DC power supply that comes in those sets. Not a problem at all. Let's see here. What else do we have? Talked about that one. Have one up here a little bit further. Vision Niagara a month ago and love it. I'm glad that you are. It was a fun engine. We had a lot of fun building that project. The track pan effect on the tender, I think, is one of my favorites. When you fire that off, it really puts out an impressive stream. And then we also have a new one here. Louis just bought his first Lionel train set. Congratulations and thank you. Hope you're enjoying it and having a lot of fun. You are getting started in a fun hobby, and you start with something simple like a train set, and then before long, you're sitting at a workbench painting ridiculously tiny shelves and workbenches for for the rest of your world. So we all start with our train sets, and then just keep on going. So a couple more things I want to show tonight, and I think the next one we'll do is adding a little bit of a rust effect here. So I want to continue to weather some of these pieces. So I'm going to work a little bit more on this casting. It's a little bit of a lighter colored, just a small work cabinet. And we're going to add a little bit of rust and grime. The first thing I'm going to do is add some small rust spots. And to do that, I'm using a special pen. This is sort of a permanent ink that's almost like an ink wash in a pen. It makes it really easy to apply. So I hit some of the areas here earlier already, so you can see them here along the hinges. Just a little touch of this. But we're gonna rust this up a little bit here along the base, because that's where you would have all the water in the garage on the floor piling up, and so you have your most of your corrosion and rusting would be down here at the base. Maybe a little bit along the seam here where the doors are always rubbing together. And if you can hold a pen, you can do weathering with this stuff. This is a pretty easy technique. And again, I'm doing this on a very tiny detail casting, which is a fun way to start and learn. But you can use all these same techniques on any model that you have that you're working on. Here we've got another cabinet. I'm going to do the same thing. Just highlight some of these hinges. Latches. Now, if you don't have a pen like this, let's rest on the top of that. You can also get the same or similar effects using acrylic paints. get a slightly darker color here. This is raw umber, one of my go-tos for a darker, heavier rust, a really dark rust. And we're going to stipple a little bit of this on as well. For here, because it's so small, I'm going to use a basic toothpick. And this is a handy tool for getting into tight spaces and adding small details. And you don't have to clean your brush afterwards because it's just a toothpick. So we can see here how small we can get. And I want to emphasize, you don't necessarily have to go to this extreme depending on where your detail is getting placed. Keep that in mind as you buy and place and paint and weather your details. There's no end to how much work you can do and the level of realism you can apply. But if you're going to bury this at the back of the garage and never be able to see the work, well, you're just doing it for the fun of doing it. And you'll know it's there, but you might be the only one. All right. Last but not least on here, because I think this one's getting pretty close, I want to add a little bit of weathering powder. I just have to decide which shade. You can get these powders or chalks from a variety of sources at the art store or the hobby shop. You can get them in pre-made up powders like this. You can also get them as sticks. Whichever way you prefer. Both will give you very similar results. Again, when I do chalk weathering, I tend to have a set of brushes that I use only for chalk weathering because you don't want to be bouncing back and forth between a wet paint and the chalk. Inevitably, you're going to get chalk and grit in places that you don't want it. I'm just going to go with some of this brown here because I like it. We'll stay on the same cabinet. Maybe we'll rust this side a little bit more. Just going to touch it on there gently. And the nice thing about the powders, as opposed to even the inks and the washes, is that they really are just dead on flat. So they kill any shine that you may have had lingering. And it doesn't take much to get the job done. One of the biggest mistake I see with people who use the powders is you overdo it. It's very easy to overdo these. But the best part about the powders too is if you do overdo it, you get yourself a little bit of a wet paper towel, if necessary for small castings, even an old toothbrush, or a toothbrush of somebody you don't like very much, and you can scrub that powder right off and get it right back to where you were before. All right. So I think I'm about happy with that. The only thing I'd like to do is maybe rub a little bit of the dirt off of the middle of these, because that's where you'd be banging the cabinet closed. So the paint would be a little more worn off, or the dirt would be a little more worn off there. And so to do that, we're going to reverse weather. And this would be easier to show on something larger. But I set out to do tiny stuff tonight, so that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to take a little tiny bit of sponge, dip it in a little bit of water, and just where I want to take some of this off, just hit it and take some of that off. And you can see how I'm bringing it right back to the original light blue. Now I did clear coat this, so no matter how hard I scrub, I'm not going to take off that acrylic light blue paint. But now I'm pretty happy with that. So I think we can call that casting done. All right, and I would continue then to go through and do these additional steps to each one of these things as we want to get it brought to life. So the next thing I want to do though is start talking about how you anchor all these things down. We've been going for about 35 minutes already, so we've got a nice little assortment of castings here. Most of them are about ready to go into the model anyway. And we're going to be putting these inside of our garage, as I said at the beginning. And I'm imagining that the typical viewing angle on this, when it eventually ends up on my layout, if I can adjust this, actually it'd be easier to bring it back to the main camera here. I expect that most people will look at it from an angle about like this. So what you're going to see when you look into the garage will be this wall and then the figures out here in the front. So that's where I'm going to focus most of the details. I'm not worried too much about the outside wall of the garage, and I'm not going to worry too much about right inside this front corner because you won't really be able to see it. I can't turn this to a point where anything right inside the door is going to pop out at you. So I'm not going to waste my time detailing that there. What I'll do is lay this here, and I'm going to try and do this in such a way that you can see it. And it's this is the biggest challenge of doing these programs is just figuring out how to get the camera angles right. Hopefully you're seeing inside of that box. So I can just lay our castings about where I think they'll be shown. Put this shelf here. Rusty work cabinet there. And these I'll just glue right onto the wall. They'll just stick right there on the wall. When it's all said and done, I'll glue my figures to the garage floor, and we'll glue the garage floor on the back. The garage floor is nothing more than a piece of cardstock, probably recycled from a box of something, painted a light gray and weathered with some of those chalks you saw earlier to give it some tire marks on the floor. So we'll glue these parts in place. Since I'm gluing white metal to plastic, for this I'm going to use super glue as our best bet. And when I glue small parts, the way I like to do it is to, again, do a scrap of something here to work on. But I'll either put a small dollop of glue on my palette and work off of that, or if I'm only doing one or two small pieces, especially with the super glue, I'll use a toothpick again. This is a heavier gel of the glue, so I'm going to dip in there and get a little bit on my toothpick, try and get the strings off of it as best as you can. And then we're going to put some of that glue right here on the back side of this casting. I'm going pretty sparing on this, even though this is actually, as castings go and as gluing goes, this is sort of a larger, easier surface to demonstrate on. I'm still going to try and do a neat job, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to spend all this time making these beautiful castings and then turn around and slap a big ball of glue on it, and that's all you'll see. So I'm going to line that up with the bottom of the floor so it's not floating. Press it into place on the wall. I want to just double check to make sure my height looks good. It does. And we've got one down. Oh, it didn't quite set yet. There's our first one. Super glue works best for metal castings. you can use it on almost any of them. But for metal castings, it's really your best bet. For some of the other types, you can use, if it's a plastic detail part, for example, you could just use your regular plastic modeling cement, and that'll be just fine. Just making sure that my cabinet isn't floating in the air before the glue sets. And let's try and get this back to where you can see it again. And just having, again, right there now, you'll see that we're starting to get some detail and adding some life into this garage. And from a normal viewing angle, even if I never got the rock band going in there, I would now have something that would start to attract your attention as you saw this on the layout. So I'm not going to glue in every last detail tonight, but I will talk a little bit more about detail placement. So looking at this from above, put my wires in so they're not at house level. We've talked about putting in the details inside the garage. I'm also going to position a few details around the outside because why not, right? So some of these trash cans and things, for example, we'll put those out here on the side of the house. Maybe another trash can around the front. In the front here, I'll plan to plant some shrubs. We do some window boxes here already. Maybe a porch light, mailbox out by the curb. Little things like that start to tell the story. Since I expect most people to view it from this angle, I'm not going to worry about adding a lot of details back here. I've got a great porch on the back of the house that if it gets put in a spot where it's visible, could be another great little mini scene. You could do things all around it depending on the viewing angles that you have. But I'm going to focus most of my details and my best details on the parts of the structure that you're going to see. That way you get the most bang for your buck. And there's no end to this. You can finish your building up, put it on the layout, and then come back to it 2 months later and add more details to it. That's the fun part of model railroading. This is the part that can just go on and on until you run out of time, which is about where we are tonight. It's about 7:45. I want to thank those of you who stuck along with me through the whole thing. It's amazing how quickly an evening can slip away from you painting a few detail parts, but that's the fun part of the hobby, at least for me. So we'll get this one wrapped up and get the band playing in there, and Dave will have some good Tiger Army to listen to here once again. Chuck says need a grill on the back deck. Absolutely, it is definitely grilling season, and somewhere in my bag of parts around here, I've got an outdoor barbecue set that'll probably end up out there. If not on this house, gives me a reason to build another one. So I want to thank everyone who came in here and joined in. As I said, this will be the end of season 1. We're going to take a summer off from Workbench Wednesdays, just because we know this time of year you typically are outside enjoying the summer evenings and doing more stuff. So I'll be back again in September with more new projects and more new tips. Please, at any time, feel free to post on our social media. And if you have suggestions or things that you'd like to learn about, I'm more than happy to cover those topics down the road, no matter what part of the hobby it has to deal with. And we'll hopefully hit the ground running in September with a whole bunch of new things and new projects. So until then, or until we meet over the summer with catalog tidbits and everything else again, middle of July is C2 release date. So we're about 6 weeks out. It's hard to believe we're only about 6 or 7 weeks out from the catalog right now, but it'll be here before we know it. I want to wish everybody a happy summer, a safe summer. Enjoy your layouts. Enjoy some outside time as you're out there driving around and enjoying the summer. Don't forget to take pictures of trains, buildings, anything you might want to add to your layout. It'll come in handy when you're back at the workbench next fall. So enjoy it. and we'll see you back here in September. Thank you, everybody.